Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining me today on this live stream. I've been noticing several posts on LinkedIn and in some forums, some stuff being said about reliability-centered maintenance. And I just feel that it's time to set the record straight. So what I want to talk about today, and if you can put in the comments, if you can see and hear me, that would be awesome. Hi, Scott. Will you let me know if you can see and hear me? And it says someone says a LinkedIn user, hi. I think you have to give, I'm using StreamYard to stream today. So I think there might be something that you have to click to give permission to let it show your name if you want me to see you. Okay. And tell me where you're listening from also. Dubuisi, is that how you say your name? Thank you for tuning in today. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen real quickly. Thank you, Scott. You can see and hear me. I want to, let me see. I got to share my screen. Okay, here we go. I think I'm sharing. Let's see. Okay, so while I'm just make sure that you can see my screen, the topic that I want to talk about today is how to succeed at reliability-centered maintenance, because there is a lot of misinformation out there, and I feel we need to talk about it. So what I want to talk about, and this is going to be a three-part series, a three-part live series talking about this topic. So what we're going to talk about in these 3 days is, number one, how to understand what reliability-centered maintenance is and what it can do, and how to apply it correctly. And I don't think you can see my screen yet. So we're just going to go manual. How about that? I'm going to try one more time. Be kind. I'm still new to lives. All right. Well, that's just not going to work, but that's okay because we're just going to go manual. So, all right. Like I mentioned, we're going to talk about how to succeed at reliability-centered maintenance. So the first thing I want to say is that reliability-centered maintenance has been around now, Rcm principles have been around now for over 50 years. But so that's good in one way, and that way is that it's a tried and true process. It's been tested, it works, and I can tell you from my own perspective, I gave my technical heart and soul away to reliability-centered maintenance 22 years ago. And I've seen how it can literally transform an organization when the process is used correctly with the right people. But there are two problems today. Number one, many people don't understand what reliability-centered maintenance is, how it fits into a reliability program, and what you can get out of it. So that's number one, being able to understand what it is. Being able to understand what it is. And number two is applying it properly. So we're going to do a 3-part live. Today, I want to talk about what reliability-centered maintenance is, but also what it isn't. And then in our next 2 lives, we're going to talk about applying it properly. Because if you've ever heard, put this in the chat if you've ever heard this. Have you ever heard that reliability-centered maintenance takes too long, or it's too complex, or you don't get the results that you need from it? Put in the chat if you've ever heard something like that. Because in these 3 lives that we're going to do together, we're going to debunk all of that. And I've got some other quotes, some other things that I've been reading lately that it makes my hair stand up. Okay, I'm going to look at the comments real quickly. Scott from New Orleans. I hope you're safe there, Scott. You got some storms going through. Thank you, Martin, loud and clear. Calgary, Canada, Dubuisi. I hope I'm saying your name right. Hi, Leon. Martin from Trondheim. I hope to see you guys again soon. That was such a wonderful experience. Trondheim, Norway. What a wonderful time that was. Subramanyam from India. Thank you, Subramanyam, for taking my challenge. That was a wonderful experience. Mike from Colorado. I know you couldn't see my screen. That's user error. I'm still new to this live thing in StreamYard, but don't worry, I'll figure it out. But today, that's okay. We're going to go manual. See, okay, so you know how when it comes to equipment, we have like backup pumps and, backup equipment, stuff that's kind of waiting in the wings in case something goes wrong. Well, that's my sketch pad here. So we're good to go. Okay. Yep. Wayne says he's heard that it costs too much. Scott says it has a bad reputation. Luis, I want to say, okay, so Luis Neves or Nevis, I'm not sure how to say your last name, Luis, but Luis, you are the inspiration for this live. Luis and he sent me a message and we messaged back and forth. And so it is because of Luis that I'm doing this live series. And I was going to do it all in one live. And Luis is the one who said, maybe do it over, like a few so that, all the information isn't that overwhelming. So, okay, so thank you, Luis, for that. Subramanyam says Rcm is a lengthy process and takes at least a couple of years to get the results. Okay, Subramanyam, if you're talking about maybe an entire platform or an entire plant, then yes, it can take years to get results. But one of the things we're going to talk about in this live is scope of analysis, because one of the misconceptions out there is that you have to do reliability-centered maintenance on everything if you're going to do it, but that is not true. You can do it as, you can apply it as widely or as narrowly as you want and as you need. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about, we're going to talk about understanding what reliability-centered maintenance is. And the first thing I want to say about Rcm, I'm going to call this the 3 knots. Okay? Number 1, reliability-centered maintenance Reliability-centered maintenance is not a maintenance strategy. Okay, reliability-centered maintenance is a process that an organization can use to formulate optimized maintenance tasks. Now, when I say optimized maintenance tasks, that's another topic that we hear a lot in our industry. And I think that sets a lot of people spinning when they hear that, because we think, oh, brother, now we've got to optimize our maintenance. Well, let's just look at very simply what that means. Can you see me? Here we go. It's all backwards for me. All right. Let me just do it this way. Okay, in order to identify, in order for a maintenance task to be optimized, this is all it means. It has to satisfy two criteria. Number one, it has to be technically correct. It needs to be technically the right thing to do. And all that means is based upon the failure characteristics of whatever failure cause you're managing with that task. It has to be technically the right thing to do. Now, let me ask you this. How often do you change the alternator in your car? I want you to put that in the chat. And there's a little bit of a delay. There's like a 30-second delay, so I can't see your answers right away. So maybe we'll make it a rhetorical question. Or I'll ask myself, how often do I replace the alternator in my car? Now, I drive a 2014 Subaru Forester. Well, I will tell you that I never proactively change my alternator. I only change it if it fails. But that's because for the most part, my alternator fails randomly. So if something, the definition of random means it has the same chance of failing today as it does tomorrow or next week or next month. So I've never changed it in my 2014 Subaru Forester. So it's now 7 years old and I've never changed it. It's still working. If I replace it today, does that mean that it's going to be, that I know it's going to work for another 7 years without failing? No, I don't know that because it's a random failure. So it would not be technically the correct thing to do to replace it. Now, how about my engine oil? I replace my engine oil every 7,500 miles. Is that technically the right thing to do? Well, it absolutely is. And that is because my engine oil behaves according to this curve, where this axis is age, and age can be counted in any number of units. In my case, I'm using miles. And the y-axis is the conditional probability of failure. What that means is there's a big difference between the conditional probability of failure and the probability of failure. So the conditional probability of failure means on the condition that my oil makes it to 7,500 miles. If I go any longer than that, I know that the probability of failure, given it reaches 7,500, is going to start to drastically increase, right? My additives are going to be depleted. Maybe there's water in there, etc. And I'm not going to be able to lubricate my engine components properly. This is what makes changing my engine oil technically correct. So that's the first part of optimized maintenance. The second part is this. It has to be worth doing. Now, we don't have to do a calculation to figure out if changing my oil is worth doing, right? I mean, let's just use our common sense and we know that it's worth it. So let's say it's going to cost me, I don't know, $500 over the next 5 years. Let's just say, it's probably a little high, but let's just say about $500 over the next 5 years if I have to change my oil twice a year. If I don't do that, if I drive my car for 5 years, so now we're talking roughly, I don't know, 80,000-ish miles without changing my oil, I know that I'm not going to be able to lubricate my engine components properly. I'm going to damage my engine. After about 5 years, I'm going to have major engine damage. That's going to cost me about $5,000 to fix. Plus, I'm going to be without a car for a couple of weeks while it's being done. So is it worth it? $500 to change my oil twice a year over 5 years, or let it run to failure? See, it's a no-brainer. That's all that optimized maintenance means. It's a very basic concept. Now, sometimes we deal with failure modes that are failure causes, specific causes of failure that are more complex than that. And then we may need a more complex analysis. But for the most part, with our equipment, for the most part, it's pretty straightforward. So that's what this means. So getting back to the point, the 3 knots. Reliability-centered maintenance is not a maintenance strategy. It is a process that we use to identify what maintenance we should be doing. And it's all based upon common sense. Most of the basics of maintenance and reliability are embodied in the RCM process. Okay, I'm going to pause for a second and look at the comments. Risk-based maintenance will identify the critical assets, and on those assets, we can have an RCM done. Okay, Elton, that's one of the things that I want to talk about in day 2 and day 3 is one of the things is the scope. You don't have to do RCM on everything. When you do reliability-centered maintenance, you can choose what you do it on. And one way to choose is by doing a risk analysis. You can do a formal risk analysis on your equipment, or you can just say, if you want to start with a couple of pilot projects, just use your gut and say, okay, these 2 pieces of equipment are my most critical. Let's look at what we can do RCM on these pieces of equipment. Daub, I don't know what you mean by not really. Dubuisi, you've never changed your oil? You must have some special oil. Tell me about that. Luis, alternator may be an item that some may not know or be familiar with. What about using the car lights? Yes, okay, Luis, that is an example also, like your headlights. You don't replace your headlights. If we come back over here, right? We don't replace our headlights every year or every 2 years, right? That is a random failure. So when a headlight goes out, then we replace it. Thank you for that, Luis. Okay. Nabugwu says RCM is not a maintenance strategy. No, it is not. So let's get clear on what RCM is, right? So RCM is a process. I want to make sure okay. I have me on my phone to make sure that technologically you can still see me. RCM is a process, right? There are 7 steps, 7 very common sense steps. Number 1 is we identify equipment functions. And all this means is we identify what we need from the piece of equipment that we're analyzing. That's all it means. What do we need it to do? This is what reliability is, right? If your equipment gives you what you need from day to day, you're going to walk away saying it's very reliable. So we're not going to document what it was designed to do. Here, we're going to document what we need. Number 2 is functional failures. In what ways can it fail to fulfill its functions? And then number 3, this is a super important step, is failure modes. Now, let's pause for a second, because when I say, Dubuisi, you said you mean your alternator, right? Right, okay. When I use the term failure mode, I'm talking about a specific cause of failure. I use the term failure mode and failure cause synonymously. Now, this is what my mentor, John Mowbray, used to say. And my friend, Chris James, my friend and colleague, Chris James, reminded me the other day about what John said. And he used to say that failure modes are the currency of our equipment. So just like money for human beings, that's one of our currencies, right? It's money. So these are American dollars. Well, not all failure modes for, which way do I want to go? This way. Not all failure modes for equipment are created equal, so to speak. Meaning we've got some failure modes that don't matter very much, right? Just like $1. If I lost $3, that wouldn't that wouldn't matter very much. I mean, I don't want to lose $3, but it doesn't matter. I could even lose 5 and I'd be okay, right? So that would be the equivalent to maybe the cup holder in my car breaking. In terms of consequences, it doesn't really matter. But if my battery dies or the alternator does fail, and then all of a sudden I'm driving and my lights start blinking and I lose power, I lose electrical power to my vehicle. Now I'm stuck on the side of the road, maybe on the highway, maybe at night, maybe in a desolate location, which might be very dangerous. Now I've got safety consequences. See, that in terms of currency, that's worth a lot more, right? I can't lose this 100, right? If I lose these hundreds, this is going to matter a lot to me. So that's why it's very important to identify failure modes. Now, if you join me in the next live, I'm going to come back to this more, right? Because one of the mistakes that's often made with RCM is people go so deep into failure modes that it's like we've got all ones in our analysis, when sometimes you can use a technique that's called black boxing, meaning you can maybe just write one failure mode for a particular component, like an alternator. If I were doing an RCM analysis on my car, I would just say alternator fails. I wouldn't go deep inside of it, brushes wear, etc. I wouldn't go that deep, because why? I'm going to keep arriving at no scheduled maintenance. So the currency of our equipment is failure modes, and that's really important. So when you get this step wrong, this can cost you all kinds of time. I mean, this can make an analysis go on for months, and even I've heard people say years, that's obscene, of course, depending upon the scope. Now, if you're talking about an entire plant, yeah, maybe years. But if you're going to do RCM on your whole plant, you're going to chunk it up into sizable, doable analyses. Okay, number 4 is failure effects. Now, all a failure effect is a story of what would happen if we allowed each failure mode to occur. But here's the key about RCM is we analyze one failure mode at a time, right? One failure mode at a time, because that way when we write our failure effect, it allows us to determine, and remember, we write this failure effect assuming we're not doing anything to predict or prevent the failure mode. This allows us to properly identify failure consequences. Could someone be injured or killed? Could we breach an environmental standard, regulation, or law? Does it have operational consequences? Or maybe it has non-operational consequences, right? Maybe it doesn't matter at all. That's how a $1 bill, right? Maybe it doesn't matter. But this one, I'm not going to be throwing this on the floor, right? Step 6 is proactive maintenance and associated intervals. That's when we decide if we should be doing any preventive maintenance, like scheduled overhauls and scheduled replacements, or condition-based maintenance. Now, I often get asked the question, should I do RCM, FMEA, or CBM? Well, it's all wrapped up in RCM. If you're doing reliability-centered maintenance, you are already considering condition-based maintenance. You don't have to do one or the other. Now, the last step is default strategies, because we've got some other things that affect our equipment, not just maintenance, right? We've got protective devices like pressure safety valves and high temperature shutdown systems that we need to take care of properly. Maybe our team might identify that there is an operating procedure that's not up to par. Well, then we'll need to fix that. Those are default strategies. So here's the thing. When you do reliability-centered maintenance, Steps 1 through 4. Steps 1 through 4 make up our FMEA, our failure modes and effects analysis. When you throw in failure consequences, now it becomes a FMECA, a failure modes, effects, and criticality analysis. And like I just said, embodied in step number 6 is CBM, which is condition-based maintenance. Now, if you've heard me say all this before, hopefully it's a good review. But the reason I'm talking about this today, and this is a 3-part series, is we have to understand this in order to succeed at reliability-centered maintenance. The first thing is understanding it. Now let's go to the second not. But first I'm going to check the chat real quickly. Oh, shoot. Mark said he lost the feed. I hope you were able to get back on it, Mark. Frederick says, is there any connection between failure mode and lower replacement unit? I'm not sure what you mean by that question, Frederick. Could you get a little more detailed? Okay, let's get to the second not. Here's the other thing. Number 2. Rcm is not software. This is so important. Rcm is not software. Now, in our industry, and really I think in the world at large, we have, I did not coin this phrase. I heard this somewhere. I don't know where, but I'm sure some of you have heard of it. We have shiny object syndrome, right? Let's just get that piece, let's get that sophisticated monitoring device. Let's just buy a sophisticated software package. Let's get something to give us the reliability we need. Well, we need all these things, right? Sophisticated condition monitoring devices can save us a lot of time and a lot of money, but we need to implement them properly. And that means by making sure we know what failure mode we're managing with it, right? So the first step is not to buy the CBM technology or to buy any software, because Rcm software should be nothing more than a place where you put your Rcm information. Now, yes, of course, there are some really robust ones out there, and there are some not so robust ones out there, but all of them do not do reliability-centered maintenance for you. Okay, any Rcm software out there, and I will dig my heels in on this, and if you disagree with me, I'd love to have a debate on it. There is no Rcm software out there that can do an Rcm analysis for you that will be tailored for your equipment and your operating environment, and that can give you the best results for you. Okay, so John Mowbray used to say reliability-centered maintenance is thoughtware. It's not software. Okay, so don't fall into this rabbit hole. Let me just get this fancy thing and then all my problems are solved. No. And the same thing goes for failure mode templates or failure mode libraries. We're going to get to that in day 2 and day 3. But again, day 1 is all about making sure we understand what Rcm is and what it is not. And it is not software. Now, do you need software to do Rcm? Yes, I absolutely think that you do, but it's not the first step. And if you work with someone who's going to help you to implement reliability-centered maintenance, they usually have software that you can use without buying it to see what it looks like. Okay, so that's that. the last one, the last not that I want to go through it is not the only reliability solution, right? I see a lot of posts and I read in forums where it is misunderstood that people who are really passionate about RCM, like me, which I am, it's the technical love of my life. It's what I do, but it's not your only reliability solution. Right? Reliability-centered maintenance is a process that is going to help you determine what proactive maintenance tasks you should do. If you do RCM correctly, they will be optimized tasks, and you'll have some of the default strategies in there. But it's not a complete reliability solution, right? You've still got workforce management. You've still got your training programs, right? You've still got planning and scheduling. You still need to deal with your spare parts, right? You still have inventory management. There are a whole host of other things that you have to get under control that reliability-centered maintenance does not solve or does not give you. So, if you know me, you know I love RCM. But I will never say that it is your only reliability solution. But I will say that it is absolutely the place to begin. Because if you don't know the right maintenance you should be doing and the right intervals at which you should be doing them for your operating environment, it doesn't matter how good your CMMS, your computerized maintenance management system, or your EAM, your enterprise asset management system. It doesn't matter how good those are, because if you feed it junk, well, the output is going to be junk, right? And it doesn't matter how good of a planning and scheduling process you have. If you're planning and scheduling the wrong tasks, you're going to end up with junk, right? If you don't have the spare parts you need on the shelf, well, then that could be causing you big delays, even though you have the right tasks planned. And if you're not training your workforce properly, and if you've got vague operating procedures and maybe not very detailed emergency procedures, well, that's going to significantly affect your reliability also. Now, reliability-centered maintenance can help in many of these areas. When you do RCM correctly, which is we're going to talk about in day 2 and day 3 with the right people, it's a way of bringing to the surface maybe some operating procedures that are bad, or maybe it can help to identify a critical spare part that you should have on the shelf, right? It can affect that change, but it's not a complete analysis of your training programs or your technical publications. But if you're having some chronic problems in those areas, if your people know the operating procedures that are awful, or they know where there are some mistakes in tech manuals, that's what step 7 is all about. It's all about default strategies and making those changes that maybe need to be made. Okay, so this is what reliability-centered maintenance is all about. So these are the 3 knots. It's not a maintenance strategy, it's not software, and it's not the only reliability solution, but it is absolutely an integral place to begin. Now, I'm not going to get into day 2 and day 3 information, but I just want to say this. If you get nothing more out of today than this, let me write this down before I forget my thought. Okay, before I reveal that, I'm going to look at the comments. I just wanted to write that before I forgot my thought. Thank you, Luis. Subramanyam says, how is a CMMS software relevant to RCM? Well, Subramanyam, a lot of organizations will use RCM to identify what maintenance tasks they want to do. And then from there, they load that into their CMMS, whatever you might be using, or your EAM. And from there, it can be electronically managed. So that's one way where a CMMS fits into RCM. Okay, let me read Frederick's. Failure mode was to be performed on the lowest reasonable level. Lower placement unit is supposedly the lower level of a system before you replace it instead of repairing. Okay, Frederick, we're going to get into detail on level of analysis on day 2. So stand by for that. That's a big conversation, but I agree with you. It's a widely misunderstood one. So yes, there is a connection, Frederick. We'll get to that. Aldo says CMMS helps to track equipment failure. Yes, it does. Especially, Aldo, especially if an organization is taking the time to work with technicians where they identify what specifically caused the failure, right? Because a lot of times we might hear bearing, they'll put in a trouble request or trouble order, and it'll say bearing failed or removed and replaced the bearing. But we don't know why. We don't know what specifically caused it. So what we maybe can only glean is that, hey, we replaced 20 of those bearings last year, but sometimes the data doesn't specifically tell us what. So it's important as an organization that we create a philosophy where we start to capture data better. And that's one of the byproducts of reliability-centered maintenance. On day 3, we'll talk about all the byproducts. I'm going to write that down so I don't forget. Okay, I got it. All right, let me look at the rest here. Luis says, you are right. I think that people don't understand the maintenance history and how RCM was born. No, Luis, it's very widely misunderstood. So it's now one of my missions to help get that out, that understanding out there. And that's one of the things I want to do with these lives. If we can just understand, make sure everyone understands what it is. And so maybe, if you're on this live, then you probably know or understand what RCM is. So if you know and understand everything I'm saying, I would ask you to keep listening, but be thinking about who in your organization doesn't understand, who needs to understand, because this rolls into, we're going to talk about this in day 3, it rolls into, we hear a lot about a reliability culture. And part of a reliability culture is people understanding what reliability is. And if you're going to do RCM or any improvement effort, everybody should understand what that process is and what it's about. Okay, let me see. Yes, Luis, what they want to achieve with the RCM process. We're going to talk about that tomorrow. I mean, in the next live, and that's about what are the goals of an RCM analysis. Okay, Raid says, hi, is RCM a process that defined maintenance strategy at step 7? Some organizations aim to achieve cost savings, but the challenging is maintenance intervals. Okay, Raid or Raid, I'm not sure how to say your name, but when we identify proactive maintenance and intervals, that's all in step 6. Within step 6, that's when we identify optimized proactive maintenance. That includes either a preventive task or an on-condition task and the associated intervals. So that's all wrapped up in step number 6. Okay. So here's the last thought that I want to share for today's live until we meet again. And we'll meet again on Thursday for our second live on Thursday. Okay. That would be September 17th. So this is going to be the last topic of this live. So if you have any questions or comments, put them into the chat now. Okay. This is the last thing I want to share. You do not need to do Rcm on everything. You don't need to do Rcm on everything. I mean, it's almost daily that I'm scrolling through LinkedIn or reading on different maintenance forums, and people shy away from Rcm because they think they need to do it on everything. And you don't need to do it on everything. In fact, you shouldn't. I mean, not only that you shouldn't, but if you're working in a plant, let's just say a manufacturing plant, well, it's going to probably be impossible to do Rcm on everything. There's just not enough time and other resources available. So what we're going to talk about on Thursday is September 17th, we're going to talk about scope of analysis. We're going to talk about scope of analysis from two different perspectives. Number one, within your organization, what do you do Rcm on? And then, if you do decide to do reliability-centered maintenance, then you have to identify the scope of analysis for each individual piece of equipment, right? So like, for example, this is just a little preview to Thursday. I'll get in more detail on Thursday. But if you're going to do an analysis on an air compressor, you don't have to do Rcm on the entire compressor. Maybe you're having problems with the lubrication system, and all you want to do is Rcm on the lube system. That's fine. Maybe you just want to do it on the electric motor. That's fine too. Maybe you just want to do it on the guts of the compressor. That's fine too. What drives the scope of analysis is what your goals are. And that's what we're going to talk about on Thursday. And that's one of the biggest reasons why people say Rcm fails or it's too complex, because their scope is way too wide or deep, or they're getting way too detailed with their failure modes. Because we're going to talk about that too. I'm going to show you some examples, right? I mean, this is just some of the things I've heard. I've read, this is just in the last couple of days. Rcm is frustrating. Then people say, oh, well, you should just do Rcm light, L-I-T-E. I mean, if you're going to do Rcm, which of these steps are you going to cut out? Which one is not important, right? Let's see. Is it important that you understand what you need from your equipment? Is it important to understand what's specifically causing you not to get it? Right? Do you need to know what the consequences of each failure cause is? Is maintenance not important? Or some of these other default? I mean, which one of these is not important? So what's Rcm light? So when people say Rcm light, I think they have to do Rcm on everything, and you don't. Okay. I've heard Rcm by the book can't be executed or justified by most industries. It's a tedious process. After about 3 or 4 months of analysis on one piece of equipment, leaders figured never to do another one. I mean, that just makes me feel sad. And we'll get into those details, some of them on day 2. Okay, so I'm going to look at the chat and see if there are any other questions, and then we'll be done with today. Okay, a LinkedIn user says critical equipment. Yes, you can choose just to do reliability-centered maintenance on your critical equipment. You can do RCM as widely or as broadly as your goals dictate. And I mean, it would be nice to do RCM on everything if we lived in fantasy land, but we don't live in fantasy land, right? We live on planet Earth, and on planet Earth, it's the real world, and we all have limited resources, and that includes time, that includes money, and that includes our personnel. So we have to work within the confines of those things, right? There's nothing that says you have to do RCM on everything. Okay. Okay, I don't know who it is because you didn't click the thing that gave StreamYard permission, but a LinkedIn user says it's the first time he's heard the term light RCM. Yeah, I've heard, I mean, you hear streamlined RCM, you hear RCM light. In fact, that brings me to this. I don't know if you guys know about it, but this is called SAE-JA 1011. It's called Evaluation Criteria for Reliability-Centered Maintenance Processes. It was first issued in 1999, if you can see this, and it was updated in 2009. And I'll just give you just a quick summary. This standard was written in response to a lot of people publishing processes called, or advocating or creating processes called RCM light or like streamlined RCM processes. Now, it's a very short document. You can get it from the Society of Automotive Engineers, but the gist of the document is this. It outlines what an RCM process must include in order to be called RCM. And in a nutshell, this is it. It's these 7 steps. That's it. So we actually have a standard on RCM, and it was born because people weren't doing it right, or they were manipulating it, because I think mostly because it's misunderstood how to apply it properly. Okay. So, all right. So there you have it. So that's the gist. So that's all we're going to talk about today. I would love for you to join me back here on Thursday. I'll publish the time. Let me just look real quickly if it's going to be the same time. Let's see. Okay, we're going to go for 11:45 on Thursday, September 17th. If you meet me back here, I'll make a post as a reminder. But maybe if you want to join me again, just jot that down for your calendar. Thursday, September 15th at 11:45 a.m. And we're going to get into the guts of how to succeed. And we're going to talk about scope of analysis. So Raid says, thank you, Nancy, very helpful. Thank you, Raid. There's an IEC standard on RCM. Thank you for that, Raid. Okay. All right. So thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful day. And I hope to see you back here on Thursday, September 17th at 11:45 a.m. Everyone be well, and I will see you soon. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you. Mobolaji, thank you for joining me from Nigeria. Isn't technology awesome? I'm in Alabama, and I'm talking with Mobolaji, who's in Nigeria. That's just awesome. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Michael. Thank you. Okay. Thanks, everyone. See you Thursday. Bye-bye. Thanks, Louise. Thank you for the inspiration. Bye.